good evening, everybody. It is I, Nick Pennsylvania, here as I typically am with my good friend Brendan Bond. Good evening, Brendan.
Good evening, Nick.
I'm happy to see you. I know you got a big story for us, kind of an interesting thing. I've resisted the urge to look into anything, but just real quick, appreciate everybody that wrote to us about the previous episode where Mike had returned and to speak with us, and more than one person said something to me about it was really nice to hear a very simple and strange story, kind of like something that some sort of experience that many of us will have in the course of a life. And that's kind of what Mike said too in our conversation about it. It's, some of these things are so fantastical that it's like hard to take in. So I don't know if there was anything that you heard reading comments or anything out there on the internet.
No, much of the same. I had a few people that relayed like similar stories. I mean, some got into the whole idea of like out of place people and stuff like that, which I've had a few experiences with. But I had more than one person say like, "Oh yeah, like I've thought about someone for no good reason, and then seen them for the first time in years and years and years, like later that day," kind of thing. It seemed like people were impressed at how quick Mike's were. It was like the frequency. Like it's like, oh, you think about the person, then they're right there. Like that's pretty extraordinary. Yeah.
There was very quickly, there was that story. He sees a woman pushing a stroller and he thinks it's this woman, but it's not the woman he was thinking of. It's just a random lady pushing a stroller. But then within a minute or two, he sees that woman he had mistaken. And she's also pushing the stroller. It's not just that he saw some woman pushing a stroller and then thought it was Mrs. Y, but it's not Mrs. Y, it's just a total stranger. And then 2 blocks later, he sees Mrs. Y. It's the fact that they were both doing the same thing that I find just really, it's a wild story. There's no getting around that. And speaking of wild stories, I know you kind of asked me if I had ever heard, I think it was a couple weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, at this point, yeah.
You said, had you ever heard of the Devil's Footprints? And I thought it was a place, but it's not a place. And so I did as you instructed, and I resisted any and all urges to look into this, and for which you said my faith would be rewarded. So what's this about the Devil's Footprints? And I know you had sent me an article, and we're going to read some old-time newspapers here this evening.
Yeah. So it's funny. This is one of those stories, the Devil's Footprints or Satan's Footprints, or there's a few variations on the kind of nomenclature. But it's a case of high strangeness that gets cited a lot in a lot of books, podcasts, movies, shows, where it seems like something certainly weird happened, and everybody from the contemporary accounts agrees that something weird happened. And it's just kind of this like ongoing mystery that doesn't have a lot of great explanations. I kind of have always heard it put in the same categories of like Frog Falls and like the meat rain stories and just like things of that nature.
Oh yes, when fish like fall from the sky,
stuff like
the storm.
that.
I've heard of frog. When you said Frog Falls, I was thinking Devil's Footprints, Footfalls, like Frog Falls, like little webbed.
One of these articles does talk about frogs, actually. So there is a frog connection, as there always should be. But this story is just one that you kind of always heard about, and I'm like, okay, well, let me see what's out there as far as like different articles and everything. And like a lot of times when we look into this stuff, it's a rabbit hole once you go down. There's a ton of contemporary news articles from different publications. It wasn't like this was just one newspaper reporting this story. There was like kind of like there's like pamphlets and magazines and like books that came out around the time and everything. And as I was digging, I found a few that I think in a very endearing way cover the subject better than a lot of like modern I guess like paranormal investigators or writers or Forteans talk about. When I say contemporary, what I mean is this is back in 1855, which is one of the older stories that we've covered here in a while. And this specifically happened February 8th to 9th, like that night. is when this happened. I feel like these contemporary articles, do a really good job of laying out what happened. So I'm just going to read one of the early articles. This one was from barely a week later on the 16th, 1855. This is from the Times. And for as many times as I've read these articles, they are very old. And some of these sentences are going to come out weird. So I'm going to apologize ahead of time.
This is your first time reading it out loud, I imagine.
Yes, first time reading it out loud.
Yeah,
and,
that's always different.
Anyway, so extraordinary occurrence. Considerable sensation has been caused in the towns of Tropam, Exmouth, and Dawlish in the south of Devon, in consequence of the discovery of a vast number of foot tracks of the most strange and mysterious description. The superstitious go so far as to believe that they are the marks of Satan himself, and that great excitement has been produced among all classes may be judged of from the fact that the subject has been descanted on from the pulpit. It appears that on Thursday night last there was a very heavy fall of snow in the neighborhood of Exeter in the south of Devon. On the following morning, the inhabitants of the above towns were surprised at discovering the footmarks of some strange and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity, as the footprints were to be seen in all kinds of unaccountable places, on the tops of houses, in narrow walls, in gardens and courtyards enclosed by high walls and planings, as well as in open fields. There was hardly a garden in Limestone where these footprints were not observable. The tracks appeared to be more like that of a biped than a quadruped, and the steps were generally 8 inches in advance of each other. The impression of the foot closely resembled that of a donkey's shoe, and measured from 1.5 inches to, in some instances, 2.5 inches across. Here and there it appears if cloven, but the generality of the steps, the shoe was continuous, and from the snow in the center remaining entire, merely showing the outermost portion of the foot, and it must have been cloven. The creature seemed to have approached the doors of several houses and then to have retreated, but no one has been able to discover the standing or resting point of this mysterious visitor. On Sunday last, the Reverend Musgrave alluded to the subject in his sermon and suggested that the possibility of the footprints being those of a kangaroo, but this could scarcely have been the case, as they were found on both sides of the estuary of X. At present, it remains a mystery, and many superstitious people of the above towns were actually afraid to go outside of their doors at night. So that is the first opening article. So does this sound familiar to you at all? No.
Well, I mean, there's some curious inversions in the language there, which is definitely dating it, such as a very heavy fall of snow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right. How indirect a sentence can one make?
Right.
So, yeah, good job working through some of that. That very first opening sentence was pretty clunky as well.
Yeah.
But if you were around and reading papers at that time, I suppose it would have
been very normal.
You'd be adjusted to it. You'd be, indoctrinated into that. Anyhow, if I understood correctly listening along, it seems like the tracks were about 8 inches apart. It seems like there's some dispute as to what they looked like.
Yep.
But also that they're on the land in the snow. But they're also found on rooftops.
On thin walls, in fields.
So like narrow alleys almost.
Yes. So like in places that it seems like in places that like a normal animal wouldn't be able to go.
Did they say like it was in a direct line?
It seems meandering in a lot of these accounts. It's not. Sometimes it's in direct line. Sometimes it stops and starts again further.
And this is over the course of 3 days, I believe.
Over one night.
Over one night.
And like it said in that first little kind of quick editorial article, like I said, the first one was written by a journalist for this paper. The other two that we're gonna look at are correspondence with the newspaper, and kind of as you alluded to, it seems like this is kind of all over the place, and there's a lot going on. And like I said, in the intervening in the following days, you have tons of people writing in to these different newspapers, and a lot of times saying like, hey, here's what I saw, here's what people are reporting, here's what people are saying it may be, but here's why that doesn't, quite make sense. They start bringing in quote unquote experts in a lot of places. And there's this second article I want to read that kind of goes into a little more detail, and I think kind of gets into things a little bit more. Each one of these kind of has the same theme to that first one. This weird thing happened, bunch of weird prints, people are confused, no one knows what's going on. So I'm going to read the second article now. This one is from the Illustrated London News, Saturday, February 24th, 1855. As many of your readers have perused, I have no doubt with much interest the paragraph which appeared in several of the papers of last week. I think they're probably referring to that initial article or a similar printing. Relative to the mysterious footmarks left upon the snow during the night of Thursday the 8th in the parishes of Exmouth, Lympstone, and this one says Woodbury, Dawlish, Toynes, and other places on the other side of the estuary of Exe in the county of Devon, extended over a tract of county of 30 or 40 miles, or probably more. And as the paragraph I alluded to does not fully detail the mysterious affair, it may probably be interesting to many to have a more particular account, which I think is the unusual occurrence well deserves. So this person was reading our mind. Goes on to say, the marks which appeared in the snow, which lay very thinly on the ground at the time, and which were seen on the Friday morning, to all appearance, were the perfect impression of a donkey's hoof, the length of 4 inches by 2 3/4 inches, but instead of progressing as the animal would have done, or indeed as any other would have done, feet right and left, it appeared that foot had followed foot in a single line, the distance from each tread being 8 inches, or rather more, the footmarks in every parish being exactly the same size and of the same step length. The mysterious visitor generally only passed once or across each garden or courtyard, and did so in nearly all of the houses in many parts of several towns of the above mentioned, as also in the farms scattered about. This regular track, passing in some instances over the roofs of houses and haystacks, and very high walls, 14 feet, without displacing the snow on either side or alerting the distance between the feet, and passing on as if the wall had not been an implement. So I think what they mean there is like walking through the wall, basically, like there's no footmarks on top of the wall. It's just on one side of the wall, then the other. The gardens with high fences or walls and gates locked were equally visited as those open and unprotected. Now, when we consider the distance that must have been gone over to have left these marks, I may say that in almost every garden, on doorsteps, throughout the extensive woods of Luscombe, upon commons, in enclosures, and in farms, the actual progress must have exceeded 100 miles. It is very easy for people to laugh at these appearances and account for them in an idle way. At present, no satisfactory solution has been given. No known animal could have traversed this extent of country in one night, besides having to cross an estuary of the sea 2 miles broad. Neither does any known animal walk in a line of single footsteps, not even man. Birds could have not left these marks, as no bird's foot leaves the impression of a hoof, or even were there a bird capable of doing so, could it proceed in a direct manner, as stated above, nor would this bird, even if they had donkey's feet, confine themselves to one direct line, but hop here and there. But the nature of the mark at once sets aside its being the track of a bird. The effect of the atmosphere upon these marks is given by many as a solution. But how could it be possible for the atmosphere to affect one impression and not another? On the morning that the above was observed, The snow bore the fresh marks of cats, dogs, rabbits, birds, and men, also clearly defined. Why then should a continuous track, far more clearly defined, so clearly even that the raising of the center of the frog of the foot could be plainly seen? Why then should this particular mark be the only one which was affected by the atmosphere, and all the others left as they were? Question mark. Besides, the most singular circumstance connected with it was that this particular mark removed the snow wherever it appeared, clear as if cut from a diamond or branded with a hot iron. Of course, I'm not alluding to this appearance after it being trampled on or meddled with by the curious in these towns and throughout the villages. In one instance, this track entered a covered shed and passed through it out of a broken part of the wall at the other end where the atmosphere could not have affected it. The writer above has passed a 5 months winter in the backwoods of Canada and has had much experience in tracking wild animals and birds upon the snow and can safely say he has never seen any more clearly defined tracks or one that appeared to be less altered by the atmosphere than the one in question.
I have issue. This tracker type,
yes,
is saying never has been a footprint more clearly defined.
Yes.
But yet, from the earlier article, it seemed like there was quite a bit of discrepancy,
right,
in how these were.
Right.
What do you make of that?
So I think what you're already seeing is what we've talked about many times on this show, which is that different eyewitnesses are going to have different variations of what is the objective truth of an instance, if that kind of tracks.
Well, so basically they're describing wildly different things. Like I've heard,
right,
wildly different things. So I'm wondering, like, what is the sample size of these that people are seeing? How far do these? Was there any statement about how far these prints travel?
Well, in most of the articles, it seems to be that 20-30 mile is like what they're talking about. Because if you look at all these different areas on a map in like the Devon area, it goes across that estuary of X and everything. This is all in like southwest.
Exeter. It's like that little jutting part of
it's like
western and southwestern England, below Wales.
Yes. And it's really all over the place down there. So I mean, it like at least the towns that are affected, it is a lot of them. So it seems like it is a pretty big space. Now, because when you look at this next article, because a lot of people send in drawings of the prints. And the one that I just read, the drawing that's associated with it looked like hoof prints, like a shoe on a hoof.
Yeah, like you put a horseshoe on a horse.
Like that's what it literally looks like. It literally looks like a horseshoe. Now, in the next article, and again, I'll put pictures up on Instagram and Facebook if people want to see these. They're kind of in that shape, but like they're clearly not hoof prints, in these drawings. So, the discrepancies do continue. And I have a feeling if we sampled more and more articles, we'd probably find more and more discrepancies.
So, okay. What I know the title is The Devil's Footprints, Satan's Footprints. What are, in all the things you've read, what are people concluding it is?
So,
because were they really serious about Satanism? Because why? I mean, no offense to the people of Devon.
Right.
But why? Why would Satan be coming there? Why would he be noticed in a place like Devon, which, again, to my limited knowledge, isn't exactly the most populated place in the UK?
Yeah, right. And I think that like it appears that like a lot of people, as all these articles refer to, they refer to them as the superstitious, talking about how this can't be a natural creature. And a lot of articles say like, here's what people say it's a bird, it's a badger, it's a kangaroo. And then in the same article, kangaroo that comes up a few times is kangaroo.
Okay.
It's they were thinking about stuff. They weren't taking the easy way out.
I like their spitballing some things, but okay, kangaroo.
Yeah,
it's Cape Zoo, I guess, like a
Right. Well,
Okay.
because you have to think that like this is also in the 1850s. You're because of like British colonialism and everything, you're probably getting animals in England that people had never seen before, you know? Um,
Sure.
so like maybe there was a bit of
I'm trying to reconcile, and I'm wondering if they're saying kangaroo, because granted, they don't know what these prints are, but
right.
I can assure you they don't look like kangaroo prints. Like
They don't
this
look like
much,
kangaroo prints. Yeah.
no expert tracker over here.
Right.
So I'm enticed to believe that they mention kangaroo because the prints end up on rooftops.
With the jumping. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
it
don't
seemed
think they realize kangaroos don't jump like that.
like that. Yeah, they
They're not
don't
like
yeah.
spiders.
Right. Ugh. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, like a kangaroo is not going to jump over a 14-foot wall in a straight line either, you know.
Right.
There's just yeah, it doesn't and I think that's why folks do go to the supernatural so quickly with this is because if this is one continuous track way, like it's reported in a lot of instances, there can't be one creature naturally occurring creature doing all of it. But I think on the other
Ooh.
side of that spectrum is what you're talking about, which
Yeah.
is like, let's say it is the supernatural. The supernatural explanation in this case is almost just as baffling. Like
Well,
it doesn't
yeah.
solve like if it's the devil, like why? Like why in the
Right.
world? Yeah,
Exactly.
like
Because I was not suggesting it was supernatural.
well, correct. Yeah.
But you are right when you said that. I was saying, well, let's play
Right.
devil's advocate for the devil and say it is the devil.
Right.
Why? I do believe there's an animal though that singular, and that is a person could have done this. And I'm not saying
Right.
this is not just some. This is not a hoax. This is not even an elaborate hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
could be an elaborate hoax, or somebody has fastened horseshoes to their own shoes and ran through the snow, or more likely they maybe did a bit of that, but then convinced people or just wrote into the newspaper, or maybe it was a slow news day or something to stir something up.
Right.
I could see that.
Right. But it appears in so many different papers around the same time. So I mean like the snow maybe everyone was having a slow news day. But
I mean, we've had this before with like all the clown stuff that was going on a few years
right.
ago.
Okay, the clown
So,
stories.
I mean, this can happen, right?
Right. Right.
Okay.
Well, I mean, but again, the clown stuff that we should do an episode on that because that's the clown stuff is like a weird, both like paranormal and sociological thing.
I agree.
So that's but that's an interesting parallel. I don't think I've heard anyone mention like that as a as kind of a proxy for this kind of thing where it's
Well,
like
I'm gonna put my flag in the ground, but
Yeah.
this is why when people say, well, it had to be something that was in all these papers, well, we read,
right.
you know,
Well,
things catch fire all the
Mhm.
time. You know,
Right.
the clown thing's just one recent thing
one example
that I can
Yeah.
think of. Like, let's not, or I remember some years ago, there was a story that really got around where there was a census worker
Mhm.
who was a you know, a little person, I believe
Mhm.
is the parlance of the day. But a person with some intellectual limitations opened the door
Mhm.
and thought it was a leprechaun and
Oh,
trapped
God.
them in the closet. Do you remember that story getting around?
I don't.
Okay,
But,
I do because I heard multiple people tell it to me
Mhm.
as though they had heard it from the supervisor of the census worker, whatnot.
Right.
They were so quick to believe that the story was true that they put themselves into the story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
yeah.
I'd love
When
to
I
talk
heard it from like a third person,
Yeah.
or this is like the thing about the kid at the elementary school that's using a litter box right now.
Stuff like that. Yeah, it doesn't
That may
happen.
have happened in one place, but
It's not
we brought
happening.
this episode
Yeah.
up. We brought this up before, and you
Mhm.
said
Right.
you can't tell me no kid wouldn't have filmed that.
Right. Yeah,
But when I've
exactly.
heard multiple people tell me that at the school district that their kids go to, this
Mhm.
is happening. Well, that's when I call shenanigans.
Right. No,
But
that's
people
a
are
nice way.
so quick to believe this.
Mhm. Yeah,
Why?
no, and maybe, and again, I'd love to have a sociologist on and ask them that question.
Yeah.
You know, or a psychologist or whatever.
I remember there was one last example, because I have a question about this. I remember on the social media of the hour, this was quite some years ago, because I was on it, and there was some Russian woman had a bunch of her photos, and people had created fake posts that she was saying all this terrible stuff in it and everything, and and I remember a mutual friend of ours had put these out there, and all the comments were like, "Oh, this woman is blah blah blah,"
whatever. Yeah.
And I remember then saying, "Why? Like this doesn't read right. There's something really off about this. It's very clearly off. It's someone that clearly speaks English, but they're writing as though they are someone that learned the language after the fact." And some of the statements didn't line up for someone that's, I'm a bit in tune, right?
Right.
To language stuff. So I said, why are we all so eager to believe the worst about this person that we don't know?
Right.
And that's what I'm getting at with all of these things. Like, why are we, like the litter box story, why are we so eager to be outraged?
Right.
To believe something? Why are we so eager to believe a couple of impaired people are maltreating one another? It's just I don't understand.
Right. Well, I think a lot of that I think with this story, if that's the angle that someone wants to look at this with, is like, is this a media literacy question actually? More than
that's the phrase.
Yeah. So like, and again, media literacy is something I'm big on, because I don't think that we pay enough attention to that.
Well, and especially in this era where we have so many more tools than they did in 1855.
That's why it's so frustrating. It's easy for us to check a few independent sources whenever we see something we either agree or disagree with. Either way, they didn't have
like the reemergence of hammer pants.
Right. Yeah.
It's worse now because we should know better.
We should know better. Yeah. It's, but I think with this story, like, anyone can go on and look these up, like as we were just saying, and there's tons of articles out there saying a lot of similar stuff, but from, quote unquote different sources and different papers and everything, and a lot of correspondence from a lot of people. And I think that it's interesting that if this is just like a media frenzy type thing that resulted from something, I still think there's at least enough of a, like, why did this catch that would be interesting, because it's like we've talked about a lot with many paranormal stories. Even if the Occam's razor story is version of reality is what it actually is, the fact that it sparked something is still curious.
I agree, and to that point, before because I believe you've sent me an article to read next.
Yeah, or at least parts of it. Yeah.
Okay, well, before I get into that, and to your statement, you opened up the second article by saying that a bunch of experts were brought in, and again, I like how people are like, no idea what this could be.
Yeah,
experts in what? So here's the thing, like the tracker. Makes sense. You want to find somebody that has some knowledge of different animal footprints and maybe be able to pull some information from that.
Right.
What other experts would you bring into the field? The scene of the not crime.
Right. So in this one, they bring in, I'm sure they're all over the place, but specifically like zoologists, biologists, things like that.
This all makes sense so far.
Yes, which does make sense. There's just as many articles that are written by someone who is like, oh, I'm a shoemaker, and here's what I think about these prints, kind of thing. And it's like, okay, like,
as someone that deals in feet.
Right, yeah, like that's maybe like one step removed from what I would want. But like,
I work at the fruit by the foot manufacturing plant, and I'm gonna weigh in here with my expert opinion, but I'm asking you specifically though. What sort of experts would you bring?
I think
zoologist makes sense.
Well,
trapper makes sense.
I think someone who is an expert on weather would be interesting, like someone who is a climate expert.
They
Um,
were very focused on the atmosphere.
they were, yes, but I think that's an interesting take. It's just like I like the fact that people were like, okay, could this be like something that the atmosphere somehow caused, like some weather related phenomena?
Well, and
Or
that's
yeah,
legit too, because I
it
know
is,
that there
yeah.
was prints in the snow that people are like, well, these are Yeti prints.
Right.
And they were like, well, no, because the wind, these are actually making these normal size whatever prints
Mhm.
elongated.
Right. And it makes them look like they're in a straight line when they weren't in a straight line, like initially. Like, yeah, from the other mountain from, quarter mile away, they look like they're straight. But once you get up to them, like, and take away the fact that they've eroded basically in the snow. So yeah, I think the fact they brought in like climate and, meteorologist type folks is like that's a pretty smart thing to do. Um, so
Did they
I
bring
so I
in? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
no,
on.
I was
Go
just
on.
saying. So I don't think, and I get the impression with a lot of these articles, and you'll see that in this next one. I think people are trying to be thorough rather than extraordinary.
Okay, because they've titled it something extraordinary. I mean, you got to have a placeholder. You may as well have a catchy
Yes,
one. But at no point have they like brought in they didn't bring Ed and Lorraine Warren in, did they?
no,
Or
no.
the
That's
1855
well,
equivalent of.
right. No, and that's the thing. And it is, and again, it is possible there are some, we'll say metaphysical experts, because that's probably what they would have called them at the time. In on some articles, I didn't see any, but again, there's so many that it wouldn't shock me if someone's like, oh, I have that article. But they definitely talk to like priests and everything in some of
Okay.
these. Um, because again, like in that second article, I believe the trapper references the fact that they looked like they weren't pressed down. Like it looked like it was like a hot thing that did it and like melted the snow, not like it pressed, because they referenced that in other prints from like other animals and people in the snow at the same time, those prints that were made look normal. Some of these ones do not look normal in that sense, that it doesn't look like the snow was depressed and compacted into a print, but it was absent of snow.
So that's interesting because again, I brought up
Mm-hmm.
that quite a few of the descriptions are pretty radically different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was just with reference to shape.
Right.
Now we're hearing like with reference to how the
How they're
impression was
made.
made.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, the things that are the same, it seems like in a lot of them, like you'll see the 8 inches between referenced quite a bit in these articles.
Well, in the
So
20 to 30 miles
20 to 30 miles is what you see in a lot of these, and
in the
made
course of an evening.
overnight, and no one actually sees them being made. Now, in some of them, they say as much as 100 miles if you like added it all up, the tracks and everything. But the affected area is like 20 to 30 miles.
Okay, so I don't know of any animal that's moving
That far in
100
one night.
miles in a night, even in a 24-hour period without
Right.
a vehicle of some kind.
Right. Right.
Huh.
And it's interesting because like I'll tell you, like I have like a lot of these people, I have my own theories that cover like three of the four factors.
Okay.
I don't have anything that covers everything, you know. And that's what people kind of come up to as well. And that's, I think, what's frustrating, but I think that also leads back to what you mentioned earlier, Nick, about like, is the reason we can't get like all of the factors covered in one explanation, is that actually because a portion of those factors are either fabricated or exaggerated for any number of mundane reasons.
Yeah, I gotcha. Huh.
So
Well, would you like me to get into this article?
yeah, let's go ahead, and this one's broken up a little. This one has like an intro, then it has basically 2 or 3 pages of the same, and then it goes into a few things. So let's take this piece by piece and see what we think.
Okay, well, I've got it up on my screen now. I'm going
Cool.
to preface this by saying Brendan sent this to me about 20 minutes ago. I have not read this yet
Yeah,
aloud or in my head. So bear with me, and apologies about any clumsy sentences or
yeah. Some of
mispronunciations.
the
But
yeah some of the what's the term for the for like the cadence that they use at this
I don't
time?
know.
Is there a term for it? Like there is a lot of colons and semicolons where we wouldn't put them. So
Right. Well, the punctuations.
the punctuation, yeah.
Okay, so here we go. Professor Owen on the footmarks in the snow in Devon. To the editor of Illustrated London News. An esteemed zoological friend has submitted to me a carefully executed drawing of one of the more perfect impressions left in the snow at Lunscombe, South Devon, on or about the 8th of last month. It was of the hind foot of a badger. This is almost the only plantigrade quadruped we have on the island which leaves a footprint larger than would be supposed from its size. The sketch, of which you have given a cut on page 187, February 24th, gives a correct general idea of the shape and proportions of these footprints, but without the indications of the pads of the sole and the small 5 claws which the drawing sent to me exhibited. Such perfect footprints were rare because of those of the fore and hind foot are commonly more or less blended together, producing the appearance of a line of single footsteps, which appearance, if a bear had been abroad in the 5 winter months spent by your correspondent in Canada, would have shown him was not peculiar to the footsteps of man, but characteristic of some of the other plantigrade mammalian, though they may be quadrupedal. So I'm going to pause right there. Let me kind of translate as best I can. So basically, an esteemed zoological friend showed footprints of a badger and said, look, even though this is a 4-footed quadruped, the way that the physiology makes it look like it's 2-footed, because they I guess the feet swing inward. And the writer of this article had spent time in Canada and had seen bear tracks, which I've seen. I mean, we both seen bear tracks quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd say it looks like a single file, but it definitely looks like a smaller gait. The footprints look like much closer together, and I could see how someone could interpret it as like a bear shuffling on 2 feet.
Right. And like bears sometimes that have like the back foot and the front foot almost land in the same spot, kind of. So like I can understand why someone would see that and think that it was bipedal, not quadrupedal as well.
Yeah, I'll go on with this article, but I will paraphrase the next little bit where he basically says, providing more evidence that this could be a badger, basically saying that while badgers are less active during the winter months, they still get up and move about.
Right.
So I'm going to pick it up from the next paragraph. That one and the same animal should have gone over 100 miles of a most devious and irregular route in one night is as improbable as that one badger only should have been awake and hungry out of the number concealed in 100 miles of rocky and bosky Devonshire, which has been startled by the impressions revealed by the rarely spread carpet of snow in that beautiful county. The onus of the proof that one creature made them in a night's rest with the assator, who ought to have gone over the same ground with the power of acute and unbiased observation, which seems not to have been exercised by him who failed to distinguish the truly single from the blended footprints in question. Nothing seems more difficult to see a thing as it really is, unless it be the right interpretation of observed phenomena. Okay, so that ends that section of the letter by Richard Owen, and I am inclined to agree. And there's a couple subtle points that are made in the language where he says about the blanket of snowfall pretty rare. He also says there are surely, one badger, it's not going to walk 100 miles, but there are almost certainly 100 badgers within the area. And they could, if you don't see snow prints very often, Go on.
Right, and that's no, and that's why I really like how this article starts with this and everything, because like this at least addresses a lot of the questions that people have. The reason the footprints look weird is because not only do they not usually see footprints in snow, but they don't normally see badger footprints, and badger footprints don't typically look how you would expect them to look. That being said, a badger's home range is probably less than a mile. Like they're rodents. They're not rodents, but like
I think they are rodents.
are they rodents? I was thinking
Maybe.
they're marmots, maybe. But either way,
You know what? I'm going to look this up because
look this up.
they're
'Cause now I wanna
related
know.
to like Wolverines. They're in the weasel family, aren't they?
Oh, are they? Okay, yeah,
I'm going to double check.
Please check.
I'm going to check right now
Because I want to be respectful to our badger friends out there. I do like the idea that this at least addresses a lot of the concerns. Like, I don't think that it addresses how they moved, like over walls and like things like that, which some of this article gets to that later. So it doesn't take care of all of the problems or questions, but it takes care of a lot of them. And it's a weird enough occurrence that you can understand why the average person would be like, what the heck are these? That being said, too, badger footprints don't look anything like hooves,
No, they certainly do not.
And again, I haven't even looked them up. I'm not going to Google them. I know they don't look like, hooves, but maybe that's where some of the meteorological stuff comes in. And it's like, well, this snow was a certain type of snow that melted a certain way. And like,
Right.
it's hard. Like there's a lot of
wind and everything.
right. Like, again, there's a lot of, steps that we're trying to do to get away from the paranormal side of things, but at least this checks a lot of the boxes, and that's why I was like, okay, that's why I was alluding to like these people are being reasonable, with some of these ideas.
The badger is mustelid, which includes weasel, stoats, otters, martens, wolverines. That's Wikipedia, but Britannica.com and National Geographic. Yeah, mustelids.
Did I tell you that we saw a Fisher cat up at Moraine a few weeks ago?
Sure did. Okay. And you and I, about 5 years ago, saw that mink.
Yeah.
On the Neshannock River.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We've been very lucky with our marmots around here lately. No, but so I think that it's interesting. Again, it doesn't check all the boxes. I love the idea of hundreds of sleeping badgers coming out of hibernation in the snow, and just like tramping around the Devon countryside at night, like in secrecy, and then like slinking away in the morning. I'd watch that movie, So
sure. I mean, yeah, I agree, and I believe it said that none of these, nobody had observed anything.
No one saw anything.
So,
yeah.
Would they even register badger? I don't know how common badgers are, but I sometimes feel like in English media, they can't shut up about badgers.
Yeah,
and hedgehogs.
Boy, do they, yeah. Well, and rightfully so on both accounts.
Oh, I agree.
Like, yeah,
I'm not both counts.
Yeah. But yeah, you'd think there was colonist pigeons. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that's the case.
That's probably woefully inadequate, but even if they were as common as deer,
right. Yeah.
Are here, or even bear. Because again, you and I say like almost every time we go fishing, we see a bear.
Right.
Except for in the dead of winter. And in fact, just the other day, there was a woman in my town that was mauled by a bear right in the city,
Right. Oh, yeah.
Not uncommon.
Yeah, it's not. But that's the thing is, I don't know if the average Devon resident, if they saw a badger walking down the street at night in this little sweater vest carrying this little basket, I don't know if they register that as like unusual.
No.
They probably just greet them and then keep going. But
that's what one does. That's the custom.
Right.
If any English children's books have led me to believe.
Yeah.
Right.
But so if you want, let's go. There's more science ahead.
More
science ahoy.
Okay. So moving on, we have likewise. So I'm continuing with a second part of this.
Yeah.
We have likewise received communications Upon the above subject from A.B.P. Ipswich, a constant reader, right? And they list some other names. W.W. Somerset will perhaps state the authority for the statement of the strayed swan. The following are ingenious attempts to explain this remarkable appearance.
I love it.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
Okay. Here, and on with the reading.
Yes.
I have read with great interest the paragraph in your last publication giving an account of the most extraordinary prints in the snow, which have occasioned some excitement and fomented so melancholy a mass of superstitious folly in the villages lying southward of Exeter on either side of the River Exe. Permit me, however, to state that the outline accompanying your intelligent correspondent's recital of the circumstances hardly conveys a correct idea of the prince in question. As an amateur accustomed to make most accurate drawings from nature, I set to work soon after these marks appeared and completed the accompanied exact facsimile of those that were visible on the lawn of our clergyman's garden in this parish. He and I traced them through the low privet hedge, by a circular opening of 1 foot diameter. On applying a rule, the interval between each impression was found to be 8 to 8.5 inches. On the same day, a mutual acquaintance familiar with natural history and not long since returned from the Pacific Ocean measured the intervals between similar prints in his garden above 1.5 miles distant from the rectory, and found it to be exactly 8 inches and a half. This, in my opinion, is one of the most remarkable confounding circumstances we have to deal with. In the course of a few days, a report was circulated that a couple of kangaroos had gotten loose from a private menagerie, Mr. Fish's, I believe, at Sidmouth. Few of us have had opportunities to see the impressions made on the sand or loam by the hinder feet, or hocks rather, of this animal, and we were not unwilling to give credence to the suggestion that the exotic quadruped, walking, when it does walk, as a biped, but bounding over vast lengths of space more like a chamois, might have been loose and vagrant in the neighborhood and left the strange impress here referred to. Still, it was quite inexplicable that the animal, considering the scale of the foot, should leave in single file 1 print only, and has already been observed with intervals as exactly preserved as if the prints had been made by a drill or any other mechanical frame. So this person's, okay, pausing in the reading. This person, one, love the language.
Oh, I love it. Like, just like imagine someone sitting down at their like nook in like Devonshire, like
dear sir,
like like just it's just chef's kiss, you know. It's just so good.
Well, and his friend just came back from the Pacific Ocean. Where he's been studying the prints in the ocean.
Like imagine someone coming back from a sandals resort, like nowadays, and being like, "Oh, like
how was your time in the Pacific Ocean?"
Yeah, like it's just like it's such a specific like way of describing what someone like has done, and I like how there's enough private menageries around.
Right.
This person was like, I think that was Mr. Fish's. Like,
listen,
don't tell him.
You've been by Fish's menagerie. Everybody said it. Like, this is roughshod. These roos are gonna get out. Like, you're asking for trouble.
Right.
Fish,
and like,
what are you doing?
It like, yeah, and this kind of like flies in the face of what I thought coming into this. I'm like, there's no way there's actually kangaroos in Devonshire, England.
Oh my God, Fish was
apparently
the house
lousy with them.
Right.
Yeah. They got to pen them up. It's just, yeah. So,
yeah. I mean, if there was one menagerie, I mean, excluding all the public menageries.
Yeah. If you had to say which
in Devonshire.
One it was. Yeah.
Right. It's Devonshire, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Very good. I am sometimes guilty of adding Shire
Oh,
at the end
well,
of every English place name, and I just assume that it does
mm,
exist.
right. You know what? Let me check on that because we do have English listeners. Devon
Listen, I'm just
versus
trying to maintain
Devonshire.
our Danish and Badger
Well,
listenership.
right. Devon, also known as Devonshire. So we're
Oh,
good.
thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yes, I
It's
I
a
felt
Seri.
confident in that. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure
Yeah.
I've read at least
Boat. Yeah.
20 Wodehouse books that take place in Devonshire
Right. Yeah.
for
So
some reason or another. Okay.
we're in good shape. So there's still some more good stuff in this one. So
All
let's
right. I'm enjoying I
yeah.
think this because I feel like, and maybe it's just the way I'm reading it.
Well,
I feel like
you're
man is very excited.
yeah, it's yeah, and again, you understand why I read this weeks ago and was like, I can't wait to hear Nick read this.
I am
I
so
knew you
glad
do.
you think of me
Yeah,
in this way.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, just to kind of paraphrase, he's being like, these prints are very exact and consistent,
Hmm.
even though, they're hopping from ground to rooftop and everything. So, okay,
Yeah.
getting back to the reading, I'm going to read a little bit of where I left off just to get us back into the
Hmm.
mood of it. Okay, back to the reading. As has already been observed, with intervals as exactly preserved as if the prints had been made by a drill or any other mechanical frame. A scientific acquaintance informed me of his having traced the same prints across a field up to a haystack. The surface of the stack was wholly free from marks of any kind, but on the opposite side of the stack, in a direction exactly corresponding with the track thus traced, the prints began again. The same fact has been ascertained in respect of a certain wall intervening. No animal, no animal with cushioned paws such as the feline tribe, diminutive or large cat or tiger, exhibit, could have made these marks, for the feet of most quadrupeds tread in parallel lines, some widely bifurcated, while others approximately very close. The ass, especially among the animals daily seen, approaches the single line. The fox leaves round dots in a single line. The stoat, 2 and 1 alternatively. Wherever the feline tribe leave concave prints, whereas in each of these mystic prints, the space enclosed by the bounding line was convex, as in the print of a pattern. Early in the week, we were informed that 2 cranes had been shot at Otterton below Budleigh Salterton. Sorry for that.
No, that was a good one. Yeah.
Okay. That these were the mystical printers, but the well-informed in zoology at once rejected this explanation. Within the last 24 hours, a very shrewd and intellectual neighbor of mine, about 6 miles distance, wrote to me that a gentleman in the parish adjoining his own had traced these peculiar prints through the garden walks into a 6-inch gutter, and there he saw the marks of claws. This has induced some to suppose them to be the track of a cat mountain. 2 other gentlemen, the resident in the same parish, pursued a line of prints during 3 hours and a half, marking their progress under gooseberry bushes and esplar fruit trees, and then missing them, regained sight of the impression on the roofs of some houses to which their march of investigation brought them. These gentlemen swear to claws, upon which my correspondent, a member of the Society of Antiquities, observes, we incline to believe they must be otters driven out in a quest of food. Our friend felt toe marks at the contracted point of the print, though they were not discernible by the eye. Would you like me to pause there?
So I love how they like quantify experts because we mentioned experts earlier, and
Oh, experts and gooseberries, which
yeah,
again,
gooseberries, yeah,
very British.
yeah, very British. It is like a shrewd and intellectual neighbor. Like it's just like Steve down the road, but like he's pretty shrewd, you know. And I love how they refer to feline the feline tribe. Like I just absolutely love that.
Big and small. cat
but
or tiger.
or tiger. Yeah, it's the whole spectrum. But I think what this does point at, though, is it shows that, like, whenever the gentleman was talking about his parish and everything, like, so lots of people sound like they're out trying to figure this out at the time. It's not like, it doesn't at least sound like it's like one correspondent from one newspaper trying to like drum stuff up. Again, if we're to believe the integrity of the writer, there are lots of people giving their input and saying, oh, well, maybe it's this, and other folks saying like, if you were as learned as I, you would understand that cranes, yada yada yada. But I do think
don't have claws.
right? Because like, it's funny that they mentioned cranes this one, because reading other articles, that was one of the first things I was thinking about as someone who is really into birds. Birds showing up where they're not supposed to be for one reason or another can like leave really strange prints, in snow, I bet. And in the North Atlantic, you have a lot of really weird big birds that people wouldn't see all the time. You have different cranes, you have albatrosses, you have harriers, right. All kinds of weird things that could make prints that people wouldn't be able to recognize. That doesn't necessarily cover the lines, the distance, it doesn't answer all the questions. But when they brought up cranes, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But obviously, I am not a zoological expert.
Right.
Otherwise, I would have at once rejected this hypothesis.
So, you ever have gooseberries?
I've never had a gooseberry, but I'm really curious to know.
Yeah, I have had. I've supped upon. And in fact, when I was out in the Poconos for work last summer, I was taken by these Cape gooseberries. Okay. They look like little yellow cherry tomatoes. They're quite tart. Really? And they have like a sticky-ish feel to them. Like your hands will feel tacky upon handling them.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to get very popular because in the Poconos, you get a lot more food than we get out here in Western Pennsylvania because, you got a lot of New York people, a lot of different food cultures than we have here. But I have found Cape gooseberries now in multiple grocery stores in our immediate area and some of the more rural counties north of us. So,
really,
yeah, I'm a fan. I'm
gonna have to find them. Try it.
I can't say gooseberry though, and not think of the British people. I'm pretty sure when George Mallory's body was found, he was brandishing a jar of gooseberries. So, all right,
yeah.
So I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot here. So
there's a lot here. It is all fun. Okay.
Yeah.
The generality of such as you can reason dispassionately on a view of phenomenon which seems as yet to be without precedent or parallel, inclined to believe it must be a bird of some unfamiliar tribe wandering and hopping about this region, but all inquiry seems to be fruitless. Let's pause there. Because he's mentioned, this one writer has mentioned at least 3 different types of fruits being encountered in this. Okay.
I bet this was before lunch. This was before lunch. Yeah.
This is being a very fruitful quest, but without answers. Okay, back to the reading. I have addressed communications to the British Museum, to the Zoological Society, to the keepers of birds and beasts in the region's park menagerie, and the universal reply is they are utterly unable to form any conjecture on the subject, however correctly the impressions had been copied. Right. Because as he said, he's very astute.
Yeah, very astute.
These are facsimiles, right? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm having too much fun with this letter. I love this.
I know,
all right.
Great.
Back to this. I am emboldened to address you with more than the ordinary confidence of a correspondent well up in his facts, inasmuch as I am living in the center of the districts where the alarm, so to speak, was first given. Sir L. Newman's Park at Man Head is exactly opposite to my own residence. Star Cross Tower is an object of the picturesque and beautiful to gaze upon from my study window, and Powderham Castle gleams in the sunshine half a mile further up. These are on the other side west of the river X, 2 miles in its breadth, and the marks were as abundant throughout the places just as specified, and their neighborhood, Kenton, Dawlish, Newton, etc., as here at Exmouth, Wilcombe, Raleigh, Lympston, Woodbury, Topsham, and the vicinity of Bison and Birdley. There are many traveled men and deep thinkers too among us, far from being credulous to false prints. As Isabella says to Angelo, but eager as we are to ascertain the exact point of knowledge in natural history at which excludation of this unprecedented mystery might commence, our anxiety as zoologists or as students or connoisseurs of any of the, and here he brazenly writes in Greek, it looks like.
Yeah, I think it's Greek, yeah.
I believe so. Sciences. All right, let me go back, and I'm just going to put sciences into place. The Greek word. Our anxiety as zoologists or students or connoisseurs of any of the sciences is a feeling of apathetic indifference in comparison with our regret for the prevalence and evil working of that gross and incredible superstition which is raging like an epidemic disease among the lowest class in every direction, and I shall have every cause to rejoice if, on view of what has now been laid before you by pen and pencil, any one of your numerous readers and abler contributors should succeed in solving the difficulty and remove thereby a dangerous, degrading, and false impression. Whitcomb, near Exmouth, Mr. G.M.M. Mr. G.M.M. What can we say that hasn't already been said?
Right, dude. It's just like, so, and I think it's interesting how, so this is a bit of a pet peeve of mine in a lot of things, is falsely attributing expertise for like an adjacent reason. And you have that a lot here where this person is like, spends an entire paragraph talking about how much they care about like science and academia and being correct and like figuring stuff out and how much this sucks. And they're like, look at all the crazy people who, the low class people who are being superstitious. Can someone please answer this question so we can prove them wrong? It's like
I like how
the
same person has said, like, listen, I'm very smart, right?
I am an intelligent
I have friends that have spent much time abroad in the Pacific Ocean. That's only like what, a sixth of the Earth. Right? Okay. But then he talks about like he's intimately familiar with the prints that donkeys make.
Right.
Which seems like something like somebody is working as an iceman or a coal cart.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Would probably be more familiar.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
it's it's interesting because like you can tell how frustrated some of these people are because they're saying like, hey, here's a great explanation that, you know, Henry down the street, who is a smart person, came up with, and here's a reason
he's my neighbor 6 miles away.
Yeah, and he can see the castle too, so obviously I don't need to tell you.
It's friggin' beautiful outside my study. Let me describe some of the things I'm staring at right now.
That's how much I know. And I really do think that it's interesting how they're trying to quantify this, and I really do think they're going about it in like a good way. Like they're trying to say, like, hey, here are all the crazy things people have come up with that aren't superstition, and none of them work. I really do think it's an interesting case, you know.
Oh, it definitely is. I have hitherto unfamiliar, so I'm enjoying this. I believe there's a little bit more. Right then, okay. Reading. As much interest has been excited by these extraordinary foot tracks, I beg to offer you a few remarks in explanation of what I have observed in this neighborhood, Topsham. Myself and another medical friend bestowed considerable time in endeavoring to discover the peculiarities of this most singular impression. Pause. Again, this is the first time I've read this.
Yeah.
Back to it then. The outline certainly in all cases resembles that of a hoof, which has been given the rise to the idea of its supernatural origin among the ignorant. But on more minute examination of the tracks, we could distinctly see the impressions of toes and pad and the foot of an animal, a rough draft of which I showed to a friend of mine in Exeter, and without any comment on my part, he recognized it as being that of an otter, being well acquainted with the animal and its habits. I have enclosed you a rough diagram of the impressions which we observed within the hoof-like tracks, and the outlines of toes were larger than the rest. I am not acquainted with the otter myself, but of this I am fully convinced that the animal, be what it may, is of low stature, from the tracks having shown it to have passed uninterruptedly under branches and shrubs, etc., not more than 8 or 9 inches from the ground, and in a neighboring village it went through a 6-inch pipe drain. It must be borne in mind that most rivers have been frozen for some weeks, and therefore the otters have thus been prevented from obtaining the usual food, namely fish, and when such is the case, they ramble many miles in search of other food. The otter is not a rare animal in this neighborhood and frequents the streams near Exmouth, Lympton, Woodbury, Birdley, Topsham, Clyst, the River Exe, in all which parishes tracks have been seen, as well as Dawlish, Torquay, Totnes, etc. The tracks in this parish we observed going in contrary directions. We did not notice any in a direct line, but in alternate steps forming 2 parallel lines of steps. We saw tracks on a low wall and over the tiles, and in several instances we have visited the summer homes and tool houses of gardens, in all of which portions of the same characteristics were more or less traceable, the ball or pad in the center being more frequent than the others. Its visits have been reported in some localities in this town. I'm going to stop there because that's the end of that letter, and I'm going to say yes. Yes. So, now, I started reading this and I said, the language of this sounds too much in the beginning like the language of the previous 2 writers, which makes me think that they were the work of one writer. But the voice definitely changes.
It does.
And I'm inclined to agree that this is the most logical explanation. I can see people getting badger and otter footprints mixed up. They are, as we learn, mustelids, and therefore would likely have somewhat of a similar print, but also the frozen streams, the presence of snow, all of these things, it makes perfect sense. It also tracks with why they're in this specific region. It also tracks with the distances and the meandering route that it follows. Yes, the devil has come to Devonshire, and the devil is an otter, or rather, all the otters of Devonshire. So I like this explanation. It holds water with me. Now, I am not familiar with the otter myself.
The otter.
As the author states, but again, it's logical. It's not a rare animal. It's not a damn kangaroo hopping about. I think we have heard from the pen of the most logical correspondent, dispassionate correspondent. He's not about erupting a class war over the topic. So
yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's not
siding with him.
Like, it's interesting because like it's funny because like
him or her,
him or her. I've seen otter prints in the wild. Just over in Harmony, you can see beaver tracks too sometimes, and because of like the webbing and everything, they're a little rounder than what you would expect. And additionally, you would think that otter tracks, like when I think of an otter moving, I think of them like slinking, over the ground. Like I picture them being on like their belly and just being cute and sliding around things. But if you look at actual otter tracks, yeah, which is cool. But if you look at actual otter tracks on like, Google Image and everything, you could see how if those were in snow, they might be vaguely hoof shaped because they are like so kind of like roundish. They're not as triangular as like the beaver ones typically are. And they have that kind of weird gait that we mentioned with the badgers earlier, where sometimes they're kind of turned in, they're turned out here and there. So you could see like, okay, maybe I could see how someone would mistake this for a straight line. The 8 inches, I don't know about that. Some of the articles were obviously, and other ones we saw were very particular about the whole 8 inches thing. I think the frozen rivers being a weird thing, the snow being a weird thing, at night, the otters can't be making much noise. And if there was like a few families of otters could probably cover a lot of ground in a night. You know,
They're
like
not
that's
splashing about.
right. And they're not being cute. They're not sleeping on their backs and holding clams and rocks.
Right.
Because they like them. Though I bet there were some otters that found some good rocks that they normally wouldn't have when they were out that night. So.
Well, you've done it again, Brendan. Yeah. We found a ridiculous story and we got down to the bottom of it.
We did. Otters.
Otters. You know what? Yeah. I am inclined to believe that because as we've been talking, I was looking up other things, and I've seen people suggest that there was a hot air balloon.
There was like
something was dangling about,
like a rope was dangling off a hot air balloon.
I thought, yeah, I guess that makes some sense. But now I'm thinking, oh my goodness, no, that is so silly. Otters.
Right. Yeah, it's. I
am
think it's
totally satisfied with this answer. Yeah, I don't even have to go back in time.
Which normally we would, yeah, but not. We would. Not, yeah. No, I'm saying otters because again, like the supernatural. Like as much as I would love to do the whole supernatural element, and as cool of an idea as it is having whatever version of the devil they're talking about walking around with cloven hooves in the snow in Devonshire early February.
You'd much
night.
Rather have otters running around.
A bunch of families of otters out playing sounds way better. And like, I don't know, they could probably get up on a roof. Like, they're nimble, they're dexterous.
Yeah.
So
well, if you would like to write an overtly purple prose letter to us, replete with lots of inversions. Right. Yeah. How would one write to us?
You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Ghost Furnace Podcast, or you can send us an email at theghostfurnacepodcast@gmail.com.
And make it old time.